Welcome to the Copeland Coaching Podcast, where it's all about turning your job search into a slam dunk. Your host is Angela Copeland.
Welcome to the Copeland Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Angela Copeland. Live in the studio with me today, I have Rick Trotter. Rick is the in-game announcer for the Memphis Grizzlies and an on-air personality at the MBS Broadcasting Network and a pastor at the Downtown Church in Memphis, Tennessee. He's also the voice you hear at the introduction of every Copeland Coaching podcast. Rick, thanks for joining me today.
It's my pleasure, Angela. Thanks for asking me to be here.
Yeah, it's really great. I think this is the first time we've actually met in person.
It is. It's just that day and age where you make a lot of connections online, whether it be through social media, and we're kind of just avatars until we meet one another. So, and it's good because there was no awkwardness. I've had some pretty awkward interactions going from the online world into the real world.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I'll be somewhere and I'll get a random tweet. Hey, Rick Trotter is sitting in the corner, and I'm like,
no way,
dude, just come over and say hello. Like that.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, and I mean it's a new way of interacting with people, and so I expect some a little bit of awkwardness, but it's just funny sometimes when people, would still, even though we're in the same vicinity, would rather engage you through social media than face to face, or just come over and say hello.
I think it feels safer, and maybe they feel like it's less invasive on your time that you choose whether or not you respond. But that's really
but there was a time and day where we didn't have that, and if you wanted to get to know someone, you just had to come over and say hello, which I think probably relates to the field and kind of what you talk about with your audience, is just having the confidence to come over and make an impression.
That's true, absolutely. So I mentioned to you before, people talk about you to me all the time in terms of being really inspired by your career.
Wow.
Because you've transitioned between multiple kinds of careers. I mentioned that you are the announcer for the Grizzlies and you're also a pastor. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you did before that?
Yeah. Well, I had first of all, my first dream kind of died. I was as a young high school student and went to a performing arts high school and got a scholarship to a college to do music. And but my dream was to become, just a pop recording artist.
Really?
Yeah, and so I kind of chased that down, much to the discouragement of my parents and some others. But I had had a lot of support, and when I felt like I was in the right place at the right time in Atlanta during the time in the '90s when the music industry was really based as far as R&B and hip hop goes, at least, that was coming out of Atlanta really strong.
Yeah.
And the opportunity just didn't, the right door didn't open for me.
Yeah.
So there I was in college, only sure that I didn't want to become a music teacher. And so I said, okay, we've got to figure something else out, if this music thing isn't going to go in the direction I wanted it to. And that's when I changed my major from music to psychology and human behavior.
Oh.
And so just knowing that I've always considered myself a people person, a lot of I like making connections with folks. I've always been the type person that in a short amount of time, it didn't take me long to build a rapport with people.
Right.
And then before I know it, they're spilling stuff that I didn't ask for, and I'm like, okay, now, so what does that mean? What do I do with that?
Right.
And so I just thought, psychology would be kind of a good way to kind of get into the human psyche and behavior, and has some, of course, most of the people go into it because they got their own demons and
right.
things
I noticed
that they're trying to work through. So I went down that path, and as I was in school doing that, I started working at ChickfilA, and that just kind of worked my way from in the kitchen to a team leader to kitchen supervisor to shift manager to general manager of a store.
Right.
And just kept learning and kept working. I'm not I don't consider myself a back of the house type person, because I am a people person. I like being out front where I can engage.
Right.
But coming into ChickfilA and not knowing anything, I knew, I had to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And so while I was studying and working in the kitchen, and I got to know my crew, and before I knew it, they recognized that I was leading the crew, even though I didn't have a title.
Right.
And a lot of that was about relationship, just getting to know the strengths and the challenges that the individuals on the team had. How can we, capitalize on the things that we do well and turn some things around? And before I knew it, I kind of worked myself out of the kitchen, which much respect to people who are kind of wired that way. It's not my wiring, and so coming out to the front was definitely more of what I was looking for.
So how long did that take between when you started and when you became sort of the leader?
A 2.5 to 3 year process.
Okay.
From start to finish before I became general manager.
Yeah.
And I just loved it. Being associated with a brand that people respect. I'm not. Fast food is always kind of looked down on generally, but then you say Chick-fil-A, and the expectations are different, and you generally you say Chick-fil-A and people smile, so just being associated with not only a brand but a product and just a service standard that I could be proud of, and that I can feel like I'm not having to put on airs to do my job.
Yeah.
And so I loved it and enjoyed it.
So how long were you there for in total?
In total, about 7 years.
Okay.
Even when I was between making a transition here in Memphis, I worked for Chick-fil-A for about 2.5 years here. Okay. And in a director role at the store on Union Avenue, but I was a director of operational excellence, and so just day-to-day operations, front of the house, back of the house, just you name it. It was all kind of, in some ways, under my belt, and so I enjoyed that too, because now instead of just a night kitchen crew of maybe 6 or 7 different people, we've got about 60 different people. Some of them I work with on during the daytime and at night, and again, just the same principle of just how can we capitalize on the things we do best as individuals and get a better result as a team. That a lot of that translated into success for us, and Union Avenue is still doing really well. So
you're not there anymore, right?
No,
Union
no.
Avenue. But it sounds like through your jobs that typically you've had more than one gig at one time. Is that?
Yeah. Well, I've got a
accurate?
family, and I'm married. I've been married 11 years to my wife Heather, and she and I were friends as kids, and so
that's a good story.
We've been around for a very long time. I think I met her when I was 12 and she was 11, and our families have been close over the years. And it wasn't until later in life that we started dating, and we were a little nervous about that because our families knew each other, and we didn't want to cause a rift there if things didn't work out. But here we are 11 years later, and I think our family finally believes that we were serious about it. Initially, everybody was like, "Hold on, wait a minute," But yeah, so we moved to Memphis after our first year of marriage, and I've been here for 10 years. We've had 2 children, Jackson, who's 8, and Ashlyn is 7. And, so I felt it was really important for my wife to be able to spend as much time home with them and helping them to develop. And as we looked at the numbers and, what it would take for her to go back into the workforce and, pay daycares or babysitters and things like that, and we said, it was really financially almost a wash. If she went back to work, we wouldn't be gaining. So I knew it was, but I knew, kind of the one full-time thing wasn't going to make the ends meet.
Oh, wow.
And that's when I just started kind of beating the bushes to say, what do I do well? What skills do I have that I could leverage in the workforce? And it really, I'll be honest, some of the things I've been able to do have well exceeded my expectations.
Yeah. So that's really interesting. So when you asked yourself, what do I do well? And you kind of did that reflection, did you do that kind of on your own? Did you think to do that on your own?
Yeah, I did. Psychology degree without, post-secondary education and those kind of things. It can only take you so far, even in the industry. In Chick-fil-A, in order to really exceed where the level I was at, I had to become an owner operator.
Yeah.
And that's just a level of commitment that would cause, we'd probably have to move here or there. And, at the time we were really loving what was going on in Memphis and wanted to be here. And so I just didn't want to, take a chance on becoming an owner operator and then have to move to open a new ChickfilA in Arizona or,
I see.
California, as awesome as that sounds. But we wanted to be here in Memphis. And so, I had to find some things that would keep us, kind of anchored here.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. That makes sense. So how long have you been an announcer just of any kind?
Only during the time I've been working for the Grizzlies. So I started with them in 2006, and I'm approaching my 10th season with the team.
That's so exciting.
And it is. It's amazing. That time has flown by. And so that was my first entrance into being an announcer. And but I've announced some baseball and some hockey and high school football. I've done some things, and so it's not. I would imagine that my experience is the exception and not the rule,
right, as
to how to get into that. Most guys kind of start at those levels, at high school, college levels, and then, kind of work their way up into bigger opportunities. But had a unique opportunity here in Memphis to answer an open call for an audition.
Okay.
And once I won that, the NBA position was mine. And so I had to learn a lot on the fly.
So how did you hear about the open call?
Well, here's where my singing ability comes into play. I sang the national anthem for the Grizzlies. The first time we moved, the first year we lived in Memphis,
that's so cool.
Auditioned to sing the national anthem there. And you just go to their website. They've got, talent auditions and things like that are usually posted on the website. And so each year, I've got 45 home games, not including the playoffs, and they have to fill those spots with anthem singers. And so I auditioned to do that, and they enjoyed it and had me out 2 times during that season. So that summer, I went back looking for the national anthem singing auditions again. And I saw there was another audition they were holding, an open audition, and it was for PA announcer. And the guy who was there before, John Paul Stevenson, is phenomenal. I mean, he's a radio voice, and you hear him. Even if you turn the radio on in Memphis right now,
right,
you'll hear John Paul Stevenson's voice. Well, he was leaving that position, and I respected his work, and really. Once I got the job, I was really nervous because I felt I had some big shoes to fill.
Yeah.
But it's not often that guys leave that position, but he was leaving. He's actually working in Houston now for the Rockets. They heard he was coming, and they made room for him. That's how good he was.
Wow.
So, but anyway, that just kind of left a hole for them, and one they needed to fill really quickly.
So were there many people at this audition?
Yeah. So I think they took over 200 applicants, and by the time it was time for a live audition, they kind of narrowed that down to about 30 people.
Okay.
And had us all do a live audition in FedEx Forum, in the arena, in the middle of the floor at a little table with a microphone, which, you're never in that scenario ever.
Right.
But, it was pretty intimidating. And so this was, kind of an American Idol style, audition where there's 3 or 4 judges there, and but you don't get any feedback from them. You just go out, do your thing, and they say thanks for your time, next, kind of thing. And you're watching your competition go in front of you and after you. So it was pretty nerve-wracking. And but I survived that round of auditions. They narrowed it down to about 7 of us, and we did it all again this time for some season ticket holders. So there's probably about 50 people watching this next audition. And I was one of 2 people standing after that, and it came down to an interview at that point.
Okay.
And I had another rare opportunity where the president of business operations was leaving the organization, going to another sports organization, which is just kind of, how the business goes. And
Sure.
And he told me, he said, what won me over for you was not only your ability to just showcase your talent, but he said, but you communicated a passion and love for the game when we interviewed you. And so the other guy that I was competing against was very polished. He was, had been in broadcasting for a while. I just knew I was going to lose to this guy. I wanted to give this guy the job. He just, he looked the part.
Yeah.
He spoke really well. He had a great voice, and I just figured his experience would win out. But it wasn't that. It was, for at least in the words of the president of business ops, was that it was your passion and communicating that in the interview.
I think so often people forget that because they feel like you're going to be just judged on qualifications alone, but in reality, they want to pick someone they like and someone who's really into their mission. And it sounded like you were really aligned, with the organization. So that's really cool.
And we had a baby on the way, so there may have been some urgency.
Right.
Some urgency in my tone then. But but no, I'm a firm believer. And even when we interviewed people at ChickfilA, and I was responsible for hiring folks, and those are the type things that we looked for. It was not just the experience, but are you serious about what you're doing? Are you passionate? Can you do you believe in yourself? And so that would sometimes be the thing that would get people over or someone else who may have a little more experience.
So what did you do to prepare for the audition? I mean, did you just go in, or did you do something in beforehand?
I've been a long time NBA fan, and so I look more into the organization. I did study the Grizzlies and their history, and some of it I knew just because I was intrigued by the team. One, that Memphis wasn't an expansion team, one of the youngest organizations in the NBA at the time. And even when I was in Atlanta, I was intrigued by this little team that was in Memphis. They made the playoffs 3 times, even though they didn't win a game those 3 times. But for an organization and a team that was that young, it was just rare to see. So I already had a bit of a scope for who they were and where they were coming from. The fact that the franchise started in Vancouver in '95, and then here we are. Not very long after that, they had relocated from Vancouver to Memphis, and so you're kind of like, man, what's going on there? So, but I did just kind of research and look up the organization and just who's calling the shots, and learn a little bit more of the history, so that I felt like when in the interview I could speak well about the organization that I was becoming a part of. Reading some of the things about how active they were in the community, those things were important to me. So to be able to speak about those and talk about, coming alongside them and being a part of that, I think was really important too.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's your favorite part of working with the Grizzlies? Because, there's got to be a lot.
Sitting front row at an NBA basketball game but not only for free, but they're paying me to be there.
Yeah.
So, NBA basketball and pro sports themselves, they're just huge. If you've ever been at a college game or a high school game, there are a lot of things to enjoy. And then you see the pros and you realize, man, this is much bigger. It's a almost larger than life experience. The game presentation and the production of the whole thing, from beginning to end, is just kind of this seamless framework of there's rarely a moment to breathe. Everything kind of goes from one thing to the next, and it's very connected from beginning to end. And just being a part of that and experiencing that is huge.
Yeah.
And I don't have to make excuses about, to my wife about, hey, I'm going to watch the game with the guys. It's like, no, I'm going to work.
Right. Exactly.
So that's the most fun for me. Also just being a part of a team that's winning, because I will admit the first few years when we weren't winning, that was a rough time. So.
That's funny. Well, I talk to a lot of people who are interested to get involved or start working in professional sports for the first time. And sometimes they're younger, but a lot of times they're mid-career.
Okay.
So if we are in this situation where we're interested to start working in professional sports, on the operations kind of side of things, do you have any suggestions for where to begin?
Yeah, I would say, and this is not just based on my own experience, but even the people that I work with, most of the people, no matter what part of the organization they're in, are sports fans. And so whether it's ticket sales or marketing or even all the way down to the trainers and physicians that are on staff and things like that, all of them are sports fans. And so I would think that it would be very difficult for you to pursue a career in sports in whatever capacity it is without having a love and a passion for that game.
Sure.
I can remember when you probably one of the rougher times around the organization was a lockout that was just a few years ago. And you had people, the NBA and the players union were, having contract negotiations, disagreements. The players were locked out of the facilities, so there's no basketball going on. When there's no basketball going on, there's no money coming in, or very little, I should say. And there were people who had to suffer through, a stretch of either, pay cuts and or having their positions eliminated and having to take a different position. And the people who were able to persevere were there because of their passion for what they do and their passion for sports. I'm sure. And so I think that's important. That if you're just getting into it because you think of there's a certain pay scale that you want to get, or just to be able to exercise, if you are, say, in marketing and you just want to exercise that muscle without a real passion and an understanding of the average fan and, just how sports works, I would think that'd be very difficult for you.
The other thing I've noticed, which you kind of touched on, is a lot of the folks that I talk to who want to get involved mid-career, they often will say, gosh, I love sports, and my only requirement is I do need them to maintain the corporate salary that I've achieved, that I've worked up to.
Yeah.
And I think there's a good chance maybe that's not going to happen.
There is. And so, obviously taking a look at your personal situation and knowing that going in the door, where's the floor where I can't go below this certain amount,
right?
Without, things changing pretty drastically for me, and having, several numbers in your head that you're willing to say yes to. And sometimes just being able to walk in there, knowing the expectation as you walk in the door of just, if they can't do this, then I know I can't say yes. But if they say this, then I may be able to work some things out, and just it gives you, I think, a lot more confidence as an interviewee. This is at least in my mind, when I'm coming to the table with someone, we're working out an agreement to some degree, even if you have a hard number for what you pay that position, and it may be another incentive. It may not just be financial. If it's a number that you didn't, that maybe you say, okay, that may not be the number that I was looking for, but are there other benefits that you're willing to accept alongside of that, whether that be about your work schedule or, just other perks that, you may be able to say, yeah, I can take that salary if these other things are there. Knowing what those things are can help you, I think, get out of that moment where you feel now you're against the wall and all the pressure in your palm is sweating, and you end up making some impulsive decision that could either hurt you or really compromise what you set out to do. If you've put some real thought into where's my no and where's my maybe and where's my absolutely yes. It
is really important to think about that, and I think part of the deal is companies in general pay you in part due to how much competition there is, right? So if they can't find anybody, they may have to pay a little more for somebody. But in something like professional sports, there are a lot of people who want to do that because it's really fun.
And for me with the Grizzlies, I didn't have the experience. I didn't have the knowledge. So I'm learning. And so those first few years, and I researched the salaries and realized, for what we do and for our market size, my salary was competitive. It wasn't on a high scale. It wasn't, but it was competitive for our market size and what we do, and for the fact that I've never done this before.
Exactly.
So today that's a lot different in that I've been able to come in and they see my work ethic. They see just the engagement with the fans and how they respond to what we do, and have been able to kind of respond to that with our salary, and even as the team has had more success, I'm seeing those things increase, and so if I came in there, right in the door, like, no, I need this, I don't know that I would have had a leg to stand on.
Right. I mean, when you're competing against 200 people
Yeah.
right there in person, it's a tough situation. So I'm just curious, you mentioned announcing a lot of different kinds of sports over the years. Have you been a sports fan of all different kinds of sports for a long time?
Not. So primarily I've been, I grew up a baseball fan, but after moving from Atlanta City with a major a pro sports baseball franchise to Memphis, where we don't have one, my baseball fanhood has kind of suffered a bit.
Yeah.
But I love NFL football and basketball, and so when I was so it's more of a performance when I've done hockey, and I mean, a sport that I knew literally nothing about. It was funny. I was sitting there, and have you heard of the band Five for Fighting? Mm-hmm. Okay, and I had to, and just as a music fan, I knew about them. No idea where their name came from until I'm announcing a hockey game, and they call a penalty, and I said, whoever it was will get 5 minutes for fighting, and I was like, oh my God, it's and it all kind of hit me at one time, like, oh, okay, so just that's how green I was about hockey, but it was still enjoyable. Really cold. Hockey is. I think I underestimated how cold it would be.
Are they the River Kings games?
Yeah, the River Kings down in South Haven, Mississippi River Kings, and that was during the NBA lockout that I was able to do that because the hockey season kind of coincides with the basketball season a lot, and so normally I wouldn't have had that opportunity, but when the Grizzlies were locked out and got an opportunity to do that, and it was fun.
That's fun. I love those games. Hockey was the biggest sport at my college, and so I do really like hockey.
Good. Yeah.
So I'm also wondering, so I don't think the Grizzlies was your first step into sound in general. I mean, you mentioned that you started out in music, but you were also an announcer for the Loretta McNary show, is that right?
Yeah, Loretta had a local...
Or you were a sound engineer, I'm sorry.
And I announced her too.
Okay.
So, But Loretta has a local talk show, and I learned a lot about sound as a musician, and just even though I'm not an instrumentalist, but I studied vocal music in college and that kind of thing, and so just a lot of times we had to do our own setup and put up our own stuff, and even. When it came to recording in the studio and that kind of thing, I would just learn, watching, observing. What does this do? Why do y'all do that? I'm never afraid to ask questions and to just kind of learn the why behind what I was seeing, and just really became just learned a lot about sound and how to make that happen well, especially in live settings. I wouldn't step into a recording studio and feel that comfortable, but when it comes to just mixing live sound and things like that, I learned a lot. And so she was looking for someone, and we had some mutual acquaintances, and I said, yeah, I think I could do that for her. And we did, and it went well. And the thing I didn't anticipate was she was recording these for television. And so there was, I'm having to run sound not only for her live audience, but a separate television feed too. And so I'm having to mix both, and so it was an experience, and I love doing that because it just stretched me and helped me to understand. It just kind of multitasking, just having your attention split a bit. Yeah. That I'm monitoring what's going into the television feed and what's going into the live feed at the same time.
That's interesting. How long did you do that for?
For about 2 years, working with Loretta's show, and so that's cool. And really it was just the Grizzlies and other opportunities just kind of dominated my time, and I wasn't able to continue to do that. But
yeah, that makes sense. Well, so when people are making a major career change, one of the things that they do is reflect on sort of what are my transferable skills.
Right.
And it sounds like you also looked at, what do I do well? So I was curious, you were at ChickfilA before in sort of a leadership role. Are there parts of that job that transfer into what you do today? Like, are there things that you brought with you?
No, absolutely. And I think one of the biggest ones I run into is just the importance of communication and teamwork, and just seeing that as an individual, there's a certain level of success you can do if you're skilled enough and you're talented enough and you have enough vision. But when you pool your abilities with the abilities of others, and we can capitalize on the strengths of the group, then we can do even more and really multiply, even further beyond just, the efforts of one person, has a certain level, but then you bring a second person in, and I think your production can not only increase twofold, but it can be even bigger. And so just the value of teamwork in that way has been really good for me, and so. Whether it's with leading worship and being a part of a church ministry, we have to use teamwork in order to do what we do and to do it well. With the Grizzlies, there's a lot of teamwork involved in our game night presentation. Even though I'm the one that most people hear, there are a lot of other people behind the scenes. We're coordinating with guys on running video boards and running music, and I've got to coordinate with the mascot to make sure we're on the same page, and the dance team and the choreographer. So, all of these different pieces, coming together, if we don't work well together, then it's not going to be as good as it could be. But just seeing and experiencing just the joy of being a part of a team that's working together well, it's to me, I think I get more enjoyment out of working as seeing things work together as a team and work really well than doing something as an individual.
I like that. I feel like that's like the perfect answer. I mean, so often we see people who are really successful, and I think we like to think, gosh, they did that all on their own, and oftentimes that person is kind of happy to pretend that was the case. But so often it's like there have been so many people that have helped you, whether it's today on your team or throughout your life. Like, you didn't just show up where you are today. It's been like a journey with a lot of people involved.
Yeah, so. And we look at, there's several around that we look at, whether it be a successful president or a successful person like Steve Jobs or Bill Gates and those guys. They have people around them that they're working with and collaborating with, and they may be the face and the voice of what's going on.
Right.
But what you're really reaping the benefits of is a lot of teamwork that goes into that. Yeah.
That's very important. So you mentioned this before, but you studied both musical vocal performance and psychology and human behavior.
Yes.
How do you feel like you use those two things day to day now?
I consider myself a bit of a bridge builder, and so when it comes to teamwork, I look at myself as a bit of a glue guy, and just where sometimes personalities can be difficult to navigate, and you have two really talented or several really talented people who have some high level abilities, but interpersonally they struggle, and so if I can help really talented people see the value in what the other's doing, and sometimes be an intermediary or just kind of a go-between in some of those cases, helping to galvanize a team, it's not only value for me, it's value for others, and others see that value. And so, sometimes helping others realize just that, hey, you're amazing at what you do. And this guy over here, he's amazing at what he does. Now, what if we could get you guys together? And so, just being able to take that, ability into, whatever realm that we're operating in as, I see as something very valuable.
That makes a lot of sense. So I'm curious, when you reflect back kind of on your life, do you feel like you've always been able to do that even when you were younger?
In some levels. I was in an ensemble, vocal ensemble, or singing group or band or whatever you want to call it. And there's always, everybody's different personalities, different ability levels. And, I remember being in a group and had two guys who were, one guy who's an amazing vocalist, and then another guy who was a good vocalist, but he was a great songwriter, and but he wanted to sing all of his songs, and so to kind of say, hey, man, you write some really good stuff, but this guy's voice, so, and trying to, it was a tough thing, but, we got to a point where we could work it out, and still give him opportunities to, sing his stuff. I don't know how you can tell somebody, no, unless they're just terrible.
Yeah.
But, he wasn't a bad singer. It's just this other guy was just, something very unique. And, so trying to help navigate egos and just understanding, that people want to be heard. People want to feel that they're a part of something. And so how can we make sure that everyone is feeling a part of what we're doing, even though, one person may be out front or one person may be, the more prominent, person in the group, that we're all contributing to what's going on. So, and obviously under different leadership, I've been able to kind of hone that. And, and sometimes the hardest thing to do is to work those things out in myself. Sometimes it's easy to tell other people how they should be working and how, how this goes. But then, when it comes home, comes to yourself. And I think marriage has worked a lot of that out in me too, that my wife and I have to be, partners in managing our family and raising our kids and nurturing our marriage. And so, I can't just walk around autonomously and just making decisions and, just putting my foot down here and there. I could do that, but I think things would not be as fun if I did. So what's best for all of us is to be able to work together. And so just learning humility and how to work together with her and bringing both of our strengths to the table. Hey, what do you do well? What do I do well? And that we see more success as a family and as a unit.
Yeah, absolutely. So the theme that I've kind of noticed as we've talked is that the decisions that you've made about your career have been very self-directed. Like you've been kind of an entrepreneur of your own career in a way. Do you feel like, has it always been the case that you've sort of taken these steps on your own?
It's difficult to say that because along the way, I've never made a decision without someone, always having someone who's in my corner who knows me.
Right.
And knows when it's like, well, Rick, that just sounds silly. Or Rick, I think you're onto something. I think you could do that. And even sometimes someone saying, Rick, I think you're really underselling yourself on this. I think you could do more.
Okay.
And so in order to have those type people, it's been my father at certain times in my life. It's been my wife at certain points in my life. I've got, probably 2 or 3 really close friends, and all of them, who I respect in their individual businesses, away from our friendship, so it's not just a friend who's, hey dude, you should do this. If he's not doing well at his job and he's not being successful in his own right, then it's difficult for me to take advice from that guy as much as I would love him. And, he's still a friend.
Yeah.
But I've been blessed to have close friends who also are doing well themselves,
right?
And some of the things that I invite them into, I'm a part of their circle, and there are other guys in their circle, and so just having people in your corner to help you think through, just some of the, so what does this mean? What are the implications of taking this career path? Or, man, are you marketing yourself enough? Do enough people know you and what you do to be able to ring your phone or send you an email? Those kind of things that those people are challenging me to, and really holding me because it can get discouraging. I remember during that audition process with the Grizzlies, and this was a 6-week process, and that doesn't sound like very long, but when you're kind of waiting for an answer, just think of you're trying to get a job you really want, and you go through the first, there's competition out there, there's only one position, and so it took them about a week to get back to us after the audition, and then they schedule another audition a week out, and so you put that together for 4 weeks, and then they call me back after a week, and then there's an interview, and then they'll give the final word in another week. It was a 6-week process during the summer, and during that time, and I'm just my wife is like helping me stay grounded, and my friend is encouraging me, and those kind of things, and I don't know that I would be who I am without the support of those people. And so yes, at least on the front end, a lot of the the genesis of the idea of the direction I wanted to go in was mine. But even running that through people to say, yeah, I think that's right on, or man, I'm just not sure that you have time to get involved in something else like that, you know.
The message that I really hear is that it's important to have mentors and to have a support system.
Right.
But I think the other thing, though, I really like is that you didn't sit back and wait for some company to tell you what to do, or some big corporation.
Yeah, well, and it's urgent for me, you know, and I don't know how urgent it is for them in those situations, but you know, I know I've only got, you know, just trying to capitalize on, at least with the Grizzlies and things I've been able to do with visibility, and you know, with ChickfilA, and just capitalizing on opportunities, you know, not wasting opportunities, to be willing to do the dirty work, quote unquote, and you know, those first couple of years at the Grizzlies where I wasn't making as much as I maybe thought I really wanted to, but just understanding, man, I've got to, you know, keep pushing at this and do well, and take some chances here or there, and you know, to kind of make the experience unique. And why would they, you know, this was a contract basis with the Grizzlies, and so I was only contracted for that season, and so I needed to give them reasons to renew that contract, to a point where right now, you know, the season starts in a week, and I'll probably get in trouble for saying this, but you know, we haven't even talked about a contract. You know, there's no discussion there. It's just, no, this is our guy. You know, and so even though I'm a contracted employee with the team, they've you know, really made me feel like a part of the family, a part of the organization, and a representative for the organization in some ways. And so I've got to steward that well too. You know, when I speak, I don't always speak for myself. Right. You know, there's a church associated with it. There's the Grizzlies and their brand that's associated with it. And so just trying to wield that responsibly, you know.
I think that's also a really good point. The other thing I like that you mentioned is how long it took for a decision to be made, because very often I speak to job seekers and they're getting really, really anxious because they had an interview and they were expecting to know something and they don't know why. But so often we don't compare notes with other people who are also interviewing, because it's usually pretty private. But often those interview processes really do take a long time.
They do.
And it's not unusual. It's not personal. It's they've got an internal process they've got to go through.
Yeah. So. And I'll just let you in a little bit about what's going on right now. And so just been trying to make my way into local sports radio.
Oh, cool.
And had some opportunities with a local show that's you know, really successful and doing well. And but the station owner, as much as the program director and the host would love to have me be a part of that, the final decision is with the station owner. And at least right now, you know, he's not ready to bring on another personality. But they were at least willing to test it out and see, and we got some good feedback. And so then I got a call from a friend, and he's like, you know, I've been in radio for, you know, he's really successful in it right now. And he's saying, but, you know, it took me 2 years from the point he made initial contact with the station owner, and you know, just some ongoing talks until they finally got to a negotiation, and you know, now he's got one of the more successful sports radio talk shows in the city.
Oh, that's
and
great.
So you know, and so he was just calling me to say, hey, I know it may not seem like the ball is rolling or like things are going, but you know, be encouraged and don't be discouraged that you're not hearing anything right away.
Yeah, that's really nice. The one other thing I want to point out, I really liked about your story is that, you know, so often we look at a job description and there's requirements, and maybe we don't meet 100% of the requirements. So we choose not to apply because we think, well, you know, I've never done that before. I'm not gonna. They're never going to pick me. But the thing about your story that's so great with the Grizzlies is that you went in and you had never done that before. I mean, you had a background that set you up in a good way, but you didn't let it discourage you. Same with, you were talking about sports radio. It sounds like there wasn't necessarily a position available, but you're willing to show up for yourself. And I think that's a really great attribute for someone who's looking for a job, to be willing to take those risks and to be open, even if maybe they don't have all of the experience.
Yeah, and I'll say this, which was kind of surprising for me when I talked to the program director. One of the reasons this radio station was even interested in hearing what I do, one because yes, I have a profile. My profile is fairly high in the city with the Grizzlies, and so there's some recognition there. But he said that he looked at my Twitter interaction.
Oh.
And I was almost floored because I'm thinking,
that's awesome.
I didn't think, it's just something, I didn't think would come that heavily into play. But he said, man, I see, how you engage people publicly.
Yeah.
And so for him and in the radio industry, that meant a lot. And so, when I started my Twitter account, it's just because everybody's got a Twitter account and that's what you do and whatever. And I have been not as responsible with it before, but, seeing the asset that it can be if I'm using it responsibly. And so he actually got a glimpse into my personality and some of the things I think and some of the things I believe in, some of the things, things that are humorous or whatever, and interesting, intriguing, those kind of things that translate really well into the radio world. Is just being able to keep a connection with an audience and sometimes being able to generate something out of nothing. You're not always going to have great sports topics to talk about, but can you continue to have a conversation?
Right.
And so, I was just really surprised that came into play when we initially started talking.
Well, it makes a lot of sense because you're essentially representing his company in a way, and you're showing that you can represent yourself well to the community, which is great. Well, we've covered so many things. This has been excellent. Is there any other advice that you'd like to leave us with today for those people who are out there job seeking? I
think have an open mind about know yourself, one. And just have an open mind. I mean, we talked a little bit about the qualifications and just not thinking you have, you can be able to check every box that's maybe in their list of requirements. But remember that these are flesh and blood people making these decisions often. And that's not a knock against them. It's an asset for you that if you can appeal to them and help them understand, what you know about yourself, and at least give them a glimpse of hope that, hey, this guy may not have this person may not have, every single qualification that we're looking for, but I want to work with this person, and so how can we make that happen? I want to work with this guy or this girl. How can we make that happen? Even though there may not, sometimes even a degree, or a position that may require a certain level of education. That if you can sell yourself well enough, that they feel like, man, I want this person to be a part of our organization.
Yeah,
and that there's a lot of things that can be overcome that way. It's not always going to happen, but just like everyone who is qualified isn't always going to get the job. So keep an open mind about that. No is not a death sentence.
That's true.
It just isn't.
True.
And so being willing to accept that and continue moving, that's no reflection on who you are or what you can do. It's just a no. They didn't see it.
Yeah. Well, so for the people listening today, everyone I think will know how to look up the Grizzlies on the internet. But if we're interested to learn more about the Downtown Church, where can we learn more about it? You can find us at downtownchurch.com, and you can find me on Twitter at Rick Trotter. And I don't know about Facebook. Facebook is pretty loaded. I try to stay out of there these days, but yeah, those should get you. Great. Well, Rick, thank you so much for joining me.
It's my pleasure.
This has been great. Thanks everyone for listening. Tune in next week for another edition of the Copeland Coaching Podcast. And if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher to make sure you never miss an episode.
Thank you for listening to the Copeland Coaching Podcast today with your host, Angela Copeland. Tune in next time to get more great tips on turning your job search into a slam dunk.